the first reported case of the Zika virus in the Bahamas, the Prime Minister facing a leadership challenge, and a church leader calling for a national family planning program. We've got these stories and others. I'm your host, Nico Scavella, and this is the Tribune's Top 5. In the absence of an official BGCSE letter grade breakdown, high praise of across-the-board improvement in 8 test subjects by government officials have raised questions over how well students fared in individual subjects this year. This week, Ministry of Education officials released the official BGCSE and BJC 2016 exam test scores, but the data issued broke away from the ministry's traditional release of individual subject analysis. Instead, this year, only a general overview and percentages calculated per letter grade were released to the media. When asked to reveal the overall averages of course subjects mathematics and English, Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald said those results remain consistent with 2015's decimal averages of E and D+, respectively. According to the results issued, there were 2,107 A's, 2,847 B's, 7,047 C's, 5,428 D's, 3,297 E's, 1,885 F's, and 1,179 G's given for the BGCSE exams. Regarding the number of students who sat the tests, there were 6,450 or a 1.13% decrease compared to the 6,524 test takers in 2015. The decrease is attributed to more students taking the exams earlier than the ministry requires, Mr. Fitzgerald said. In 2016, there was a marginal increase in performance after a total of 574 candidates received at least a C or better in mathematics, English, and science. This represented a small increase of 0.70% when compared to 2015's figure of 570. A further breakdown by the ministry showed 903 students received at least a C in 5 or more subjects in 2016 compared to 961 students in 2015. This represents a 6.04% decrease. In 2016, a total of 1,459 students obtained a minimum grade of D in at least 5 subjects. This represents a decrease of 4.89% from 2015, which had a total of 1,534 students fall into this category. In comparison, the BJC results appear to outperform the 2016 BGCSE results, with officials recording the best BJC grades in 20 years. They attributed this improvement to the new criteria put in place through the National High School Diploma. This year's results have also seen an increase in the number of BJC candidates. Candidates totaling 11,703 from a total of 120 centers registered to do the BJC exams for the 11 subjects offered. The candidates came from 68 independent or private schools and 52 government schools. This represents a 10.69% increase over 2015. The total number of grades awarded in 2016 is 41,894 compared to 39,657 in 2015, an increase of 5.64%. Overall, the number of candidates achieving grades A through D compared to last year increased by 1,667. Mr. Fitzgerald said while officials note the improvements, the government still has a long way to go to raise the standard of education in the Bahamas. Archdeacon James Palacios this week said while Montague MP Richard Lightburn's proposal for state-sponsored sterilization as an anti-crime initiative is completely repulsive, the country needs to engage in a national family planning program to prevent the madness of multiple children being reared in undesirable circumstances. Archdeacon Palacios said while every woman has a right to have as many children as she wishes, and that it would be virtually impossible for any government to enforce legislation to control, quote, anyone's bedroom business, people that find themselves in dire financial straits have a responsibility to ensure their children are, quote, able to look forward to a decent quality of life, end quote. The Anglican Archdeacon also seemed to take exception to people having multiple children regardless of whether or not they can properly care for them, as he claimed that, and I quote, only poor black people believe you're supposed to empty heaven to bring these children down here to catch hell, end quote. Archdeacon Palacios also called on the government to adopt the practices of other jurisdictions to deduct money from a parent's salary that fails to pay child support. His comments came 2 weeks after Mr. Lightburn proposed that the country adopt legislation that mandates unwed mothers with more than 2 children have their tubes tied in an effort to curtail the country's social ills. While speaking at the Free National Movement's televised convention on July 28, Mr. Lightburn said, and I quote, "It is also necessary for us as a nation to consider adopting the lead of several countries in the world which result in unwed mothers having their tubes tied after having more than 2 children, which would in the end result in fewer children being born. The state should not have the burden of paying for the upbringing of children. By adopting such measures, there will be less classrooms needed in the future, less out of school every year seeking employment, and would also result in the mother of these children being able to live a better life, not having to bring up so many children," end quote. His comments drew the ire of many people, with some parliamentarians, local advocacy groups, and others swiftly condemning him for his statements. He has since apologized for his remarks. This week, however, Archdeacon Palacios said while Bahamians were right in condemning Mr. Lightburn for his statements, the country would do well to, quote, engage even more feverishly, even more intentionally in a comprehensive national family planning program, end quote. He added, and I quote, so when we talk about this issue of reproductive health and reproduction in the country, we need to engage in a sensible nationwide debate. Let's try to get this right. If you have more than 60% of children born out of wedlock every year, some of them are unplanned and some are unwanted, what are the rights of those children? Let's see what we can do on that end, and I'm sure we will prevent many a malady, many a fallout from the fact that people just are unable to provide properly for some of these children. It is a known fact that when children are not properly cared for, you're just recycling poverty, recycling mediocrity. We are recycling underachievement, he added. When are our people going to stop gambling on the future of our country? End quote. House Speaker Dr. Kendall Major this week admitted that he should not have allowed Education Minister Jerome Fitzgerald to read and table the private emails of Environmental Action Group Save the Bays in Parliament. Appearing as a guest on the 96.9 FM talk show Morning Blend, Dr. Major said in hindsight he should have stopped Mr. Fitzgerald and said in the future no emails will be read in the House of Assembly unless they are vetted. However, Dr. Major reiterated that he does not believe the judiciary should interfere with matters in Parliament and said respectfully the court ought to mind its own business. Earlier this month, in a landmark ruling, Supreme Court Justice Indra Charles declared that Mr. Fitzgerald was not legally justified when he tabled the private emails of Save the Bays in the House of Assembly and therefore could not be protected by parliamentary privilege. Justice Charles ruled that the Marathon MP's actions in March were an infringement on the constitutional rights of the applicants and ordered Mr. Fitzgerald to pay $150,000 in damages for the breach. Mr. Fitzgerald was also permanently banned from disclosure and publication of any further material belonging to Save the Bays and was ordered to delete all electronic and hard copy material within 14 days. The Office of the Attorney General has said that it would appeal the ruling and was granted a stay pending the appeal. However, Dr. Major said this week, and I quote, looking back at it, I should not have allowed that to happen. It isn't right for someone to just pick up an email, whether or not it is private or confidential, whether they got it illegally or not, and just read it in the House of Assembly for the world to hear unless it is vetted and we can determine its veracity. If that can be determined and the source is determined and no laws are being violated, then that member would have the right to divulge it, end quote. Despite his second thoughts, however, Dr. Major repeated that he thought the court's ruling, quote, violated the principle that underpinned the country's democracy, end quote. He also said parliamentarians must be in a position to speak freely and openly without fear of reprisal. Former Attorney General Alfred Sears this week announced his intention to challenge Prime Minister Perry Christie for leadership of the PLP at the party's national convention in November. Mr. Sears told the Tribune he notified Mr. Christie and PLP Chairman Bradley Roberts about his decision to contest the leadership of the party. He's also met with members of his constituency branch to discuss the matter with them. With his announcement, Mr. Sears will be the first to challenge Mr. Christie's leadership since National Security Minister Dr. Bernard Nottage and attorney Paul Moss faced him in 2009. Mr. Sears said he will present comprehensive plans for the country in the upcoming months, and enhancing government transparency and accountability is expected to be one major plank of his agenda. Mr. Sears is also expected to argue strongly for greater devolution of the Prime Minister's powers and for an expansion in the scope of local government. He also pledged to run a clean race, one without personal attacks. Mr. Christie, meanwhile, said he does not feel threatened by Mr. Sears' leadership challenge. Mr. Christie, who has been leader of the PLP for nearly 20 years, also suggested that he was not concerned about a leadership race at the PLP convention, saying the rules of the party will take precedence over everything else. The PLP's convention is expected to take place in November. It would be the first time the party has had a convention since 2009, despite the PLP's constitutional mandate to hold one every year. At the last convention, Mr. Christie received 1,158 votes in a landslide victory over Dr. Nottage, who received 2,004 votes. Mr. Moss, an attorney viewed as an outsider, won 23 votes and later left the party. Health Minister Dr. Perry Gomez this week confirmed that there is one reported case of the Zika virus in the Bahamas. Dr. Gomez said the country's first case of Zika was reported in a Bahamian man who recently traveled to Jamaica. Dr. Gomez said the man's symptoms included rash, fever, joint pains, and headache, for which he sought medical care at a private medical facility. Dr. Gomez said a sample was taken for testing and sent to a reference laboratory. A confirmed positive result was received on Tuesday, August 9th. The patient has been treated for associated symptoms and is recovering, Dr. Gomez said. The North Andros and Barry Islands MP said heightened surveillance activities continue by the Department of Environmental Health Services and that the required public health and environmental protocols continue to be conducted. Subsequent to Dr. Gomez's announcement, the Ministry of Environment and Housing, in a statement, called on Bahamians to, quote, unite and fight the bite and do their part in mitigating against the reproduction of mosquitoes. Dr. Gomez, meanwhile, urged residents to take the necessary precautionary measures to prevent being infected, which he said included applying mosquito repellents on exposed skin, wearing long-sleeve light-colored clothing, completely screening all doors and windows, and eliminating mosquito breeding sites such as items or containers that may collect water. Meanwhile, Obi Wilscombe, the Minister of Tourism, said the government is concerned about the Zika virus and how it may affect visitor arrivals, but said his team at the Ministry of Tourism will, quote, intensify its communications to the various markets to ensure that the world is aware of how we are handling the situation and that the Bahamas is, quote, still a safe and healthy place to visit. According to health officials, Zika is a mosquito-borne disease and may also be sexually transmitted. The virus is transmitted primarily by the bite of an infected Aedes aegypti mosquito, the same mosquito that transmits dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever viruses. Aside from the one confirmed case in the Bahamas, there have been 5 confirmed cases of the Zika virus in Turks and Caicos, a reported 25 cases in Florida, and an estimated 170,000 in Brazil to date. Want to get in on the discussion? Well, here's how you can. Just log on to our website, www.tribune242.com, like us on Facebook, Tribune News Network, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Tribune242, or send us a tweet at Tribune242.